Hello, everybody. You are in Tov Television, and I'm Gali Bat Khourin, and with me a distinguished guest who calls himself Brian of London. Hello, Brian of London. How are you?
I'm very good today. Though, of course, I'm not in London.
But you're off London, and you're in Israel. Okay. So the reason that I was looking after somebody like you is because recently we had, as you know, more likely, a prisoner of politics, of immigration politics. Her name is Shefi Paz. She is a hero of mine, and I think she's a hero of all Israel patriots, or as you call yourself, indigenous people. You're of Britain, and we are of Israel, because we're Sabre. And we are indigenous, and she raised to have a fight for the human rights of the people of the suburbs. It's not the suburbs; it's the lower parts of Tel Aviv that was stampeded by an immigration without any control. And she raised to be a voice for them, and immediately she got all hell broke loose on her. But she still, no matter what happened to her, even though she went to prison, nothing to compare with Tommy Robinson. And you are the one who's following him when he's in jail. You're doing his media, so we want to hear everything about Tommy Robinson.
Well, I guess as far as Israel goes, I've known Tommy personally the long from anybody living here because I got interested. You know, I left the UK pretty much in 2009, and that was just around the time in 2010 when his organization, which he founded, which was a street protest movement called the English Defence League, when that started up. And I got interested in who they were because I had friends still in the UK saying, whilst the media is saying this is a new far-right movement, these are all neo-Nazis and, you know, tattoos and skinheads, and my friends who were still in the UK and who were interested in counter-jihad movements that I was interested in said, no, this is different. This is new. We haven't seen something like Tommy before. And he's really focused on the impact that Islamic immigration has on towns and cities in the UK. He's focused very carefully on that. He doesn't really care about race. He's got lots of black friends, brown friends, even Muslim friends. But what he's focused on is the effect of Islamic immigration. And slowly
so
how
did he start to pay attention for it? Because he revealed something so atrocious, so amazingly bad that just tell us about it. What did he reveal?
He knew growing up. He grew up in a town called Luton, and he tells this so much better than I can. But I'll give you the highlights. You know, when he was young, there were like 2 or 3 mosques. Now there's 40. A whole bunch of Islamists in the UK have come from Luton. Terrorists that have gone out actually across all of Europe. The 7/7 bombers, which was the big bombing of the London Underground and a bus in London on July the 7th in 2005, I think. They came from Luton. So his town was heavily infiltrated by Muslims. And one of the things that had happened to him and his family was that one of his cousins had fallen in with a Muslim crowd. And essentially the way it works is a young Muslim man, 17, 18, that kind of thing, starts paying attention to young white English girls, 13, 14,
How old was
15.
the cousin by then? How old was the cousin?
I think around that age. The specific details he's never really said specifically, but this is a class of a crime that once you start to understand it, you realize has gone on hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of girls over the last 40 or 50 years in the UK. The scale of it is beyond belief. And what they do is, and it's called grooming, which is half a euphemism. So they call this Muslim grooming gangs. Muslim because of the convictions that have happened over the last 15 years or so, nearly all, like 90% of the offenders have been Muslim.
So wait a second here. Let's make the whole story. What happened? Like you can say that maybe there's young Muslims are dating white girls, and all the racists are going apeshit.
At first, it becomes dating, but it very quickly they give them food, they take them to takeaway shops. Then it goes to alcohol. Then it transfers up to drugs. And before very long, the girls are basically used as sex slaves. They're passed around within families, uncles, brothers, fathers. And we know this because there have literally been convictions of 25 men, half of whom are related to each other. These kinds of things. There have been cases in Rotherham and across the UK. There are official reports on this. And now when I first started hearing about this, I started hearing about this on web forums connected with the EDL in 2010. This didn't hit mainstream media. Nobody talked about this until 2013 and 14.
Where was the police? Where was the police? What the police? The young girls, young British girls, some of them very young, were gangbanged, were abused sexually, were forced
driven around the country, shared from city to city. The scale of it is beyond belief. Where were the police? Well, there are police reports, and that there are court transcripts, though those have mostly been buried and covered up. There are court transcripts of the police being called to a house where a 14-year-old is being gang raped. They arrest the girl.
They arrest the 14-year-old girl. The British police. Yes. And we're not talking about the Iranian police. No. A 14-year-old got raped by a gang, and she got arrested. What's the excuse?
The excuse is that this whole crime was basically ignored because to prosecute it and to look at it would break social cohesion in the UK.
Was there a social cohesion?
No, there isn't.
Is there social cohesion?
I believe that it's on a knife. There really isn't. And this particular crime, and this is what Tommy got famous for presenting. But along the way, he became a very solid expert on the teachings of Islam. And it's inescapable that what happened in lots of these court cases was these men they were not usually pious Muslims in the sense that they were using alcohol. Obviously, they were doing this with the girls, but they would point at verses in the Quran and say, this is a non-Muslim girl. I can do with what I want.
Let's make sure for the audience, we both know. So it's not a culture thing that in a Muslim world, that's the way they use girls. On the contrary, that's the way. If they'll use their own girls for what they've done, they'll be all murdered, and the girls would be murdered. But that's specifically a racial and religious thing. They can't do to their own population what they're doing to white girls, just because they are white girls and non-Muslim girls.
Not white. And that's another thing. The first time, if one actually starts digging into old local news reports and old local newspapers from the late 70s and so on, you start to find that, for example, I think in the early 80s, there was a big fight between the Sikh community in Birmingham and the Muslim community in Birmingham. And when you dig into it, and there's actually it ended up with literally a sword fight in an Indian takeaway restaurant. It turned out that they were using Sikh girls, and so it's not white. It's not a race thing. It's a Muslim. It's an infidel versus Muslim thing. Now, do they ever go after Jewish girls? Well, there isn't really a large enough sample area to know, but essentially,
well, they're doing it in Israel in places like in places, remote places, and they call it a romantic jihad.
Yeah, it's got names. In Holland it's called lover boy, rape jihad sometimes. It turns out that it's a phenomenon all around, and the thing is, people have not looked at it. People don't want to look at it. People don't want to talk about it. And Tommy talked about it. And I think of all the things that it was bringing that to the forefront. And of course, nobody took it seriously until the real media showed up, and they did eventually. And when you look at it, there's a fellow called Andrew Norfolk, a journalist for the Times of London and the Sunday Times, and he, in a sort of a cagey interview at some point, he does mention that, yes, whilst people were somewhat aware this was going on, it wasn't until the EDL started turning up in towns and cities across the UK with 5,000 to 10,000 bald, tattooed guys with muscles, basically kicking, basically being football hooligans. We know what that looks like, but they weren't being football hooligans they were doing this because it was real to them, because it was their daughters and their cousins that were living through this and were seeing that the problems, because it isn't the rich and it isn't the upper class and it isn't the politicians in Westminster who experience what it means like to have uncontrolled, unassimilating Islamic immigration. And even back in the day, the EDL and Tommy, they didn't talk at all about immigration. They talked only about unassimilating Islamic immigration because it looked like a conquest.
So we'll take few years, and will they be assimilated? I heard it for a long, but I want to emphasize that even if they all were football hooligans and thugs, it's still hooligan it's a word in Russian actually, so I can. In Hebrew, we say hooligan. So, hooligan. So even if you are football hooligan, or a thug, or somebody speaks really with a heavy accent that refers to the lower class of British, even though we have cohesion now, so we don't have classes, right? But you still have
Britain will never give up its classes.
But you still have classes, okay? So somebody like Tommy Robinson, who actually speaks like with a Luton accent, like a Cockney or something, or
very much.
So
it's a Luton accent. It's not. Still, the contrast is Douglas Murray. We all know Douglas Murray now in Israel. Essentially, Tommy and Douglas have not been saying. If one goes back to Douglas Murray's book.
The Strange Death of Europe.
A Strange Death of Europe. Yeah, I was thinking of another one. While Europe Slept by Bob Bauer. Bruce Bauer. People have said this about the Islamic invasion of Europe. In fact, one of the best documentaries was done by an Israeli journalist. I can't remember it. I'm bad with Israeli names.
It's Tzvi Cheskeli. Tzvi Cheskeli.
Yes. He did a brilliant job infiltrating mosques in Holland and in London, and he saw this, he knows this, he knew what was going on.
I know, but there's a funny thing about this prejudice, is that I don't know how do you refer to Tzvi Cheskeli actually in Britain, because he's doing the researching. But if you bring the truth and actually record it and put on camera and show it to you, and if they can call you a racist, it's as if the truth does not exist. if they can slam you as the barrier of the truth, you show them the evidence, and they can make you a racist or a Islamophobe. So what you saw in your eyes does not exist.
Yeah, and
it's amazing.
You know, every now and then someone records another imam, or they put it on YouTube themselves, an imam reading the Quran, and the Quran is hateful and full of, you know, curse those who've gone astray and curse those who've been led astray. Those who've gone astray are the Jews. Those who've been led astray are the Christians. They curse us 17 times a day. It's obvious what's going on.
Yes, but you know what they say in English, in Israel, they say, and in our Torah, it doesn't say that you have to shfoch chamatcha al hagoyim. So if you want, you can find the resemblance, but look at the behavior, okay? Look at the behavior. Look at the truth.
Two things. It's a direct order and a behavior. You know, we don't actually have a direct order because we don't have anything in our book that mentions Muslims because, of course, you know, a thing about eras. But Tommy just speaks different. And the level of persecution that he's gone through ever since this started, you know, I think he's now serving his 4th or 5th prison sentence since he started doing activism. This one is from this one is, you know.
Let's go through. The first time I heard from him, I think from Katie Hopkins, through Katie Hopkins, when I learned about him, we already had Chefi Paz. And he was put in jail because he was standing outside of the courts where they were delivering the gang rapist group, and he was filming them. I saw the live, and he said, "Look, here they are going to court," and he was dragged to prison because they were saying he was hurting the feeling of the rapists.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
What happened was, and it's funny, that was a Facebook live stream on a Friday morning when I go and do my exercise, and I was walking in Park Hayakon, and Tommy comes up with his live Facebook, so I'm watching it because I used to help manage the Facebook page at that time, and I see he's outside Leeds Crown Court, and he's outside Leeds Crown Court for the, I think these men were going to get their verdict, you know, to be told guilty or innocent. And
they were guilty, so he was hurting the feeling of actually rapists.
Yeah, but the point is, when you report on trials in the UK, there are incredible rules about this, because it's like the opposite. We don't have our legal system here in Israel is actually very much the British system, but without juries.
But
in England, they have juries. Yeah. Well, no, juries should be better, but
it's not Jewish. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. Yeah. You, the British people, you left Israel, but you took everything and you left us the Supreme Court. It's your blame. It's the only Supreme Court in the world, and it's the British.
I'm afraid Britain didn't have a Supreme Court until a few years back. We had
they had it for the colonies, for the mandate to control us. So they took everything, they left the court. Thank you very much for that.
Anyway, the difference here in England is you're not supposed to say anything that could prejudice the jury. But as far as I believe that, it was sort of almost too late for any of that in the case. Everything had been decided. But Tommy was trying to abide by all the reporting restrictions. But all he did was he stood outside, and these men were going in carrying like prison bags. You know, how do you feel about your verdict? And that was it. The judge sent outside the police to pick him up. The judge took him from there. Basically went through a very abrupt hearing at which he did not ask how he pleaded, which was a classic failure, and then sent him straight to prison. By that afternoon, he was in prison in Hull, sort of 150 miles north of the country. And it took, 6 or 7 weeks for that action to be found to be unlawful, and it was, and Tommy was released. It was in the end because they actually found a way to rebring it and to put him back in prison for the following summer. So, you know, he wound up serving, I don't know, 4 or 5 months for the action of upsetting rapists. Now, all of these rapists were found guilty, and I think 2 of them fled to Pakistan. They were not. So think of this. Tommy was picked up for talking to them, and he was in prison that afternoon. These rapists were convicted, but allowed to go home, not sent straight to prison, and 2 of them went to Pakistan. So
he's the dangerous for the coherence of the society, and they are just rapists.
And they were getting 16, 17, 18-year convictions and sentences for the mass rape of girls, for multiple rapes over a period of years, some 15 years earlier. That's the severity of the crime.
Underage children, some 12, even less.
Yes, all children, not.
So then he was brought to prison, and for some reason they put him with the same gang people who were there, and he was afraid that they'll poison him, so he ate for 4 months only tuna.
Yes, basically he can't be put in a prison population anywhere in the UK because every prison is 10 or 15% Muslim, and he's so famous that means, and I mean, right now he's serving a ridiculous sentence for a court case for basically for breaking a judge's rule after he lost a libel case. And that shouldn't result in a prison sentence. No other journalist has ever been jailed for a contempt of court. It shouldn't result in a prison sentence in a maximum security terrorist prison. He's in Wood Hill. You know, Britain's 2 highest category prisons are Belmarsh, where they kept Assange for years and where they kept Tommy on his last stay, and Wood Hill. He's in Wood Hill right now. It's an unbelievably high level of security, and so he's isolated. He's in a you know, it's not quite as bad as Syria or our people, but it's the worst. It's basically the worst the British state will do to someone, which is solitary.
So, Brian, how do you explain almost how much 10 years, a decade of completely incompetence of all the authorities, of the police, of the Scotland Yard, of the judicial system, to protect all those 1,000 or maybe 10,000 young girls from that gang, and all of a sudden they show such a immediately action to jail the one who just told the world about it. And is that, what is it? Vindictiveness? What is it? Where does it come from?
Look, Tommy's got a book out, co-written by a fellow called Peter McLaughlin, called Manifesto. And it's hard to explain. The big thrust of the book is really how an oligarchy is and by oligarchy, and the book, Tommy's book specifically makes it very clear that oligarchy doesn't mean the Jews. You know, it's like he's a long way. He doesn't go for that nonsense. Because we actually have an oligarchy running Israel. You know, we have the same. The left-wing forces that we have, you know, trying to put Bibi in prison instead of running the country, and all of that. It's evidence of this kind of, one can say Marxist, one can say in Britain it's something called the Fabian Society. It's a very deep malaise, and they have decided in the UK, and this decision was taken 40, 50 years ago, that the people aren't having enough babies. They need a growing population. And what did they do? They decided to import, and the population they chose to import, unfortunately for the Brits, was mostly Muslims. They got Pakistan. In Britain, it's Pakistanis. In Holland, it's Moroccans. You know, each European country, the French have got Algerians. They've all, but why they chose Islam? And I think that there's a conceit there. It's a conceit of Marx, sort of the Marxist mindset, which is that religion can be beaten. you can beat religion if you give people nice things. And so they kind of thought maybe these Muslims will become less Muslim. And the first generations that got there, you know, especially from the Pakistan in the 70s and stuff, they were pleased to be out of their Muslim country. But then over the last 40, 50 years, they've allowed Saudi Arabia and Iran to pump money into these madrasas and the mosques. They've indoctrinated the kids, and the kids are full on 100% jihadis. They're free Palestine.
The thing is, it's so ironic, because you're right. There's some Marxist ideas over there, and the Marxists, obviously, the idea is have an international revolution, so they can control the world. And I thought they will use the Muslims and to undo deconstruct the structure of the society coherence by ejecting a foreign culture into the society, and that will break it up, and then they'll be able to control the entire world. This is the Marxist imperialism. Always been.
That's what.
Always been. But what we find out now, that the Muslim imperialism has another idea. Let's use the Marxist imperialism, infiltrate into the Western world, and then we will rule over them with our rules, not the Marxist, okay? And the funny thing is that the first time I hear it from you, under the name of social cohesion. This is, it's so ironic. It's over a joke.
All of the language that the left uses, it's all twisted. It's all euphemism. Even anti-Semitism is a euphemism, which I don't use. I always call it Jew hatred, because, you know, to take a word from Hitler's mentor and use that, you know, I just Jew hatred. It's Jew hatred. But the left is
Judophobia.
They have been
they call phobia. And so much Muslim terror, and you still, if you're afraid of Muslim terror, you've got a phobia.
Except it's not irrational, because, you know, it really is. You know, I don't have to tell Israelis, but normally when I talk to sort of podcasts and stuff, I'm in this room, and this is my mamad. So, you know, I can use it. You know what a mamad is. You know that I've got a steel shutter behind this window. Because you're phobic from, you know,
Muslim missiles. You are Muslim missiles phobic.
Yeah, and you know,
you're a disgrace.
I'm 3 kilometers from Glilot, so you know what's in Glilot, and they did try. I mean, that was a really big hit. The last Iranian thing, one of them landed just like literally line of sight.
Oh, stop there! You're telling nobody confessed it in the Israeli in Israel. You just released a secret. So honestly, you just released that they managed to hit.
They missed. I mean, it was a car park, but you know, it's real. That's not phobia. I know what they're trying to do. You know,
I know. You know how they do it. You know. There is. We got used to refer to people who really hate homosexuals like they're phobic. The theory around it. Why are you phobic? Because you're yourself homosexuals, you deny it, so you hate other homosexuals. So they gave it the word phobia, and now they're using it. It's like if you think that maybe Corona is the right idea is not to put people in quarantine, as you are COVID denier. Why? Because Holocaust denier is something really alarming. So that's how they use the language. They only use the language to F with your brains. Sorry, I couldn't find a better.
No, that's the right word. Listen,
excuse my French.
I don't actually have a picture. I don't have my copy here right now. On the back cover of Tommy's book is a picture which I helped.
Find it, because it's amazing. I saw it. We'll put it on. We'll put it on the because it's not live, we'll put it on. Send it to me, it's really amazing.
It's a picture of a pig, and the pig is Napoleon, the pig from Animal Farm. But the pig is reading a book. And if you look closely, and I had to do that by hand, on the book it says, the pig is standing in front of a farm, and the people are farming. The people are basically the farmed animals of the farm, and the pig is Napoleon, and he's ruling over them. And he's reading a book by Emmanuel Goldstein, The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism. And that's the title of a book that doesn't exist, but it's mentioned in 1984 also by Orwell.
That is so brilliant. It's so brilliant.
Of course, you have to realize that Britain is INGSOC, England society. INGSOC, the INGSOC of the whole of 1984 is set in Britain. They've always been at war with, they're at war with Eurasia. They've always been at war with Eurasia. The 1984 combined with Animal Farm. And in Manifesto, in Tommy's book, it goes through at the very beginning. Basically, Orwell had a lot of getting Animal Farm published. People didn't want to publish it.
Actually, it was his books were published. The first thing is he had a book about the coal mine. I forgot how it's called. And there was two books of the first one. I know it from Jordan Peterson, but I read the book afterwards. The first one was published in the left-wing society.
He's of the left. He is completely of the left.
And the other one they didn't. The other one they didn't want to publish anymore. They realized what he's doing because he's champagne socialist. That's from him.
Yes, that is very much. And and again, the book that Tommy's written with, well, Peter wrote it and Tommy, but in discussion with Tommy, the whole way it's aimed at lefties to say, look at what they're doing around you. Really, you have to see this because, and I think we've had a lot of awakening like that here in Israel. Look, October the 7th, unfortunately, I've been studying Islam, and I mean really studying Islam. I've got a PhD in theoretical physics, but I can tell you I've spent more time now studying Islam than I ever spent studying the physics to get my PhD. But I don't have a PhD because I don't go to a university, because almost every university Islamic studies course in the whole world is sponsored by Qatar. So where do you think anybody's going to study Islam? They don't. And so our lesson for Islam comes on October the 7th, when they break out and they do exactly what's written in the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, their Prophet Muhammad, or their false Prophet Muhammad, as I like to say. I don't know who I'm going to offend on this channel, but we have to be
more likely everybody.
We have to pay much more attention to what they've been saying and what they say, and that's really all I've done.
I'll tell you something weird. Actually, we met in the lecture where Jonathan gave a talk with
Sasha Doty.
Dr. Wilf. Now, the thing is, a lot of the conversation were around how come the West doesn't see what's coming up to him. And it's so ironic because we're living here. We're here. We are the villa in the jungle. And for like 100 years, we denied the things that were not theoretical. We saw it. Every now and then there was terror attack. They butchered us whenever they could. In 26, in 29, in 36, and everywhere and every time, even in 2021, they tried to butcher people who were their neighbors, and even I don't have any motivation to be in denial because I'm a right wing, so it's actually supporting my ideas. I was still in denial. It's just, the only explanation I can give, it's like the snake from a Jungle Book. It's something in the Muslim world hypnotize everybody. I don't have any other...
I'll tell you what it is. Too bad to be true is a phrase that comes to mind. You take a little glance at it and you think it's too bad to be true. And, you know, Israel was founded too much by, you know, we know the fight, the Ashkenazi versus Sephardi, and the other thing, there's a word of unbelievable importance called dimitude, which was the condition under which Eastern Jews lived when they were ruled by Muslims. And the foremost scholar of this, the woman who actually put this word sort of into English, is Bat Yaor. And the dimitude is a mental condition. It's a condition of being a hostage. You are a hostage to Islam, to the ruler of Islam. Sometimes it's good. And you know, and this is where we get the myth of Islamic tolerance. You know, these sort of centuries go by when Jews seem to live a little bit okay. But eventually, at some point, they will get jealous. A ruler will come along who is a tyrant, and there'll be a pogrom in Baghdad. They'll kill hundreds of Jews, or you know, it's always on a knife edge, because deep in the Quran, and especially the latter half, I mean, I think I'll just say very quickly, you can sum it up quite quickly. Muhammad wanted to be accepted as a Jewish prophet. He went to the Jews. They told him, no, we're done with the era of prophecy. Go away. He went away, gathered an army, got stronger, came back, killed a lot of Jews, and formed a religion that he said to all his followers will replace Judaism. And the problem for the Muslims today is that, you know, 7-8 million Jews living here in Israel, we are a theological problem to a huge degree, because Muhammad said they would beat us and that they would replace us, but they haven't, and we're back on our land and we're sovereign again. This is an incredible affront.
It's true, and that's what you need to read the Quran. But I doubt it if we will understand, because as you said, it's too
I'll tell you another thing.
Unbelievably bad to understand. I just the thing is what you said about the Ashkenazi Jews and the Jews from Eastern. They do not have the dimihud. They came from those countries, and they told the Ashkenazi Jews, look, you can't trust them. You can't that. And me as an Ashkenazi Jew on the left, looked at them as inferior people who doesn't grab the concept of freedom, of liberation.
Of course not. 1,000 years they lived by these rules that were designed to push them down. It's slavery. I mean, it's worse.
Yes, but they came. Those Arab countries, Jews came over here, and they adapted dimihud to the Ashkenazi Jews, who immediately colonized them, and they accept that for a while. They don't accept it anymore. But the Ashkenazi Jews just couldn't grab it. They couldn't put it in their thick heads that those Islam culture is really different. The other is really the other. It's different than you. It's not like an Arab is not someone who failed to be a bourgeois lefty from the West. He doesn't want to be you. He wants to be the other. And if you stand on his way, he'll just rape you.
I think there's a very, we have they're telling you it's time.
They're telling me it's time. It's just terrible. We just started.
Yeah, so we can do this again. Islam is something we just don't talk about in Israel. We just don't. We don't want to discuss it.
We will discuss it, and I'll tell you what is so important that we're having this conversation now. Because even though you live in in Israel, you're a Brian of London, and I think patriots of all countries, of all the free world, needs to hear that what's occurring in their own country is not something that happens to them. It's happened all over the world. As you said, it's the international Marxism or international other kind of imperialism. And we need to know that we all got the same problems because, you know, every country is a country for itself and all the imperialists are the same everywhere. So thank you for this conversation. It was lovely to speak with you. I'm sure we'll do it some more. And time is limited. And thank you for being with us. And goodbye.
גדלתי בישראל בשנות ה-90. תמיד ידעתי שהעמדות שלי, עמדות של ימין, לאומי, דורשות שכנוע, נימוק והוכחה כדי לנהל שיח. הכרתי והעמקתי בדעות של הצד שמנגד מתוך מתן כבוד. מהר מאוד הבנתי שהאנשים שעמדו בצד שכנגד לא הכירו בלגיטימיות של העמדות שלי. היום, 30 שנה אחרי, בצד השני הדברים לא רק שלא השתנו, הם הפכו גרועים הרבה יותר. הרטוריקה הפטרונית, האדנותית, הפכה למרד אלים, מסוכן, שהוביל אותנו ואפשר את טבח שמחת תורה. אנחנו בערוץ טוב החלטנו להחליף את השיח המכיל והסבלני של הימין בשיח של הובלה והנהגה. רגשי הנחיתות של המחנה הלאומי חייבים להיפסק. במועדון היחידה אנחנו בונים את הקבוצה שתוביל את חילופי האליטות ההכרחית בתקופה הקרובה. אז הצטרפו גם אתם ליחידה ותוכלו גם לתמוך ולחזק את הפעילות של ערוץ טוב וגם לקחת חלק בקבוצה איכותית שתיפגש בקביעות ותבנה שיח חדש בחברה הישראלית ותוביל אותנו לעתיד טוב יותר.